I was standing in our kitchen in Seattle, 6 months pregnant, my hands shaking as I held the handwritten note I just finished. That was how we communicated, how we'd always communicated. Through written words, through sign language, through gentle touches and meaningful glances. Daniel was deaf. He'd lost his hearing in a skiing accident 7 years before we met, or so I'd believed for the past year and a half of our relationship. He was reading the note over my shoulder, close enough that I could feel his breath against my neck when he said clear as day, in a voice I'd never once heard, "Eleanor, there's something I need to tell you." I dropped the note. The paper drifted to the floor between us, and I watched it fall like I was trapped in a dream or a nightmare. Because my deaf husband had just spoken, let me go back. Let me tell you how I got here, standing in that kitchen, my entire world. Fracturing like thin ice beneath my feet. I'm 69 years old now, and I've learned that some stories need to be told from the very beginning. Even when the beginning is painful to remember, it was 1992 and I was 33 years old, still single, still working as a junior architect at a firm in Portland, still living in a cramped studio apartment I could barely afford. My mother called every Sunday like clockwork, and every Sunday the conversation inevitably circled back to the same topic. Your sister Rachel just told me she's expecting again. That'll be 4 grandchildren she's given me, Eleanor. 4. That's wonderful, Mom. The Petersons' daughter just got engaged. Remember, Melissa? You two used to take ballet together. She's 27. I gripped the phone tighter, staring out my window at the gray drizzle coating the streets below. I'm happy for Melissa. I just don't understand what you're waiting for. You're not getting any younger. Men don't want to marry women in their 30s. Mom, I have to go. I have work to finish. But she was relentless. And if I'm being honest with myself, after 3 decades of marriage and raising 2 children of my own, I can admit that I was lonely, tired of coming home to an empty apartment, tired of watching my colleagues leave early for their kids' dance recitals while I stayed late to finish deadlines, tired of being the only unattached person at every family holiday. So when my mother told me about Daniel Morrison, I listened. He's the son of Constance Morrison. You remember Constance? She was in my garden club. Her son started some kind of technology company, very successful, very handsome, and he's finally ready to settle down. Mom, I'm not going on another one of your blind dates. This is different. She paused. He's special, Eleanor. He had an accident a few years ago, a skiing accident. He lost his hearing. Something in her voice made me stop. He's deaf? Completely? Yes, but he's learned to adapt. He reads lips beautifully, and he knows sign language. Constance says he's the same charming man he always was, just quieter now. She lowered her voice. A lot of women don't want to deal with that, you know? But I thought you might be different. You've always been so patient, so understanding. I should have heard the manipulation woven through those words. But instead, I heard an opportunity. A man who wouldn't judge me for being 33 and unmarried. A man who might be grateful for someone willing to learn his language, to adapt to his world. A man who, because of his disability, might actually see me for who I was instead of what I wasn't. Okay, I said, one dinner. Daniel Morrison was everything my mother had promised, and more tall, with sandy hair just starting to gray. At the temples, sharp blue eyes that watched my lips intently when I spoke. He wore expensive suits that fit perfectly, drove a BMW, and worked in Seattle's tech sector doing something with software that I didn't quite understand. Our first dinner was at an upscale seafood restaurant in Bellevue. I'd spent 3 weeks learning basic sign language from library books, practicing in front of my bathroom mirror. But Daniel made it easy. He brought a small leather notebook and a fountain pen, and when my clumsy signing failed, We wrote back and forth like teenagers passing notes in class. Your mother talks about you constantly, he wrote. The brilliant architect daughter, the stubborn one who refuses to settle. I laughed, a little embarrassed. She makes me sound like a prize horse. She's trying to sell at auction. He smiled, and when he wrote his next message, I felt something shift in my chest. She undersold you. We started dating, if you could call it that. We'd meet for dinners, take walks along the waterfront, go to movies where we'd sit side by side in the dark, and I'd forget he couldn't hear the dialogue. He'd read the subtitles when they appeared, and sometimes he'd take my hand and squeeze it during emotional scenes. I learned sign language properly, taking evening classes after work at a community center. Daniel was patient with me, correcting my hand positions gently, his fingers warm against mine as he showed me the right way to sign hope or tomorrow or beautiful. His mother, Constance, was thrilled. She invited us for Sunday dinners at her enormous house on Mercer Island, where she'd watch us sign to each other across the table, with tears glistening in her eyes. I was so worried he'd never find anyone. She confided one evening when Daniel had stepped outside to check something on his pager, I learned later. After the accident, he withdrew so completely, stopped seeing his friends, broke up with his girlfriend, Samantha. She said she couldn't handle being with someone who was deaf. Constance shook her head. Can you imagine the cruelty of that? I couldn't. I thought about Samantha often in those early months. What kind of person abandons someone they love because of a disability? What kind of shallow, selfish woman was she? Just 9 months into our relationship, Daniel proposed not with words. He couldn't speak after all. Or so I believed. He took me to the beach at sunset, where he'd written in the sand in enormous letters, "Will you marry me, Eleanor?" I cried. I signed yes over and over. And when he slipped the ring onto my finger, a stunning sapphire that must have cost 6 months of my salary, I thought I was the luckiest woman in the world. We got married 4 months later in a small ceremony at a coastal inn in Oregon. It was beautiful, intimate, just our immediate families and closest friends. The ceremony was conducted with a sign language interpreter, and when we exchanged vows, I signed mine with tears streaming down my face. I'd found my person, my partner, a man who saw me for who I truly was, who valued patience and kindness over small talk and superficial charm. A man who communicated with me in the most intentional way possible, every word written or signed with purpose, with thought. Our wedding night, I half expected him to speak. Isn't that what happens in fairy tales? The curse is broken. The spell lifts, but Daniel remained silent. He communicated with his hands, both in sign language and in other ways I won't describe, and I fell asleep in our hotel room. Feeling cherished and complete, we moved into a house in a quiet Seattle neighborhood. A real house with a backyard and a guest room and an office where I could spread out my blueprints. Daniel's software company was doing well, very well. His business partners were talking about going public within the year. I cut back my hours. At the architecture firm, Constance suggested it, and Daniel agreed enthusiastically in his silent way. You'll want to be home more once the babies come, Constance said over Sunday dinner, patting my hand. I got pregnant 5 months after the wedding. We weren't exactly trying, but we weren't preventing it either. And when 2 pink lines appeared on the test, I ran to find Daniel in his home office. I was crying, laughing, trying to sign and fumbling it, finally just showing him the test. His face lit up. He pulled me into his lap, kissed me, held me so tight I could barely breathe. Then he pulled back and signed slowly, clearly, "You're going to be an incredible mother." The pregnancy was harder than I'd expected. Morning sickness that lasted well into the afternoon. Exhaustion that made it difficult to concentrate at work. At 5 months, I quit the architecture firm. It was simply too much, the commute, the long hours, the physical demands of site visits. Daniel was supportive, of course. He made more than enough money for both of us. Constance was thrilled. Now you can focus on what truly matters, she said, helping me fold tiny onesies in what would become the nursery, being a wife and mother. That's a woman's true calling. I was folding a yellow onesie with little elephants on it, feeling the baby kick inside me when something occurred to me. Constance, did you work after you had Daniel? Oh, of course not. Daniel's father wouldn't have allowed it. A man needs to know his wife is taking care of the home. Daniel's father was how she always referred to her ex-husband. They divorced when Daniel was in college, a scandal Constance rarely discussed. But she mentioned him that day, and something about her tone made me uncomfortable. Well, Daniel and I discussed it, I said firmly. We both agreed this was best. Except we hadn't really discussed it. We'd written about it, signed about it, but was that the same as a real conversation? Could you have a real conversation in sign language with someone you'd only known for a year? 6 months pregnant, exhausted, hormonal. I was making dinner salmon and roasted vegetables. Daniel's favorite when he walked into the kitchen. I had just finished writing him a note asking if he wanted white or red wine with dinner, even though I couldn't drink. I was trying to maintain normalcy, trying to be a good wife. He came up behind me, so close I could feel his warmth. I held up the note over my shoulder, and he said, "Eleanor, there's something I need to tell you." The note fell from my fingers. Time seemed to stop. I turned slowly, my pregnant belly bumping against the counter. Daniel was standing there, looking at me with those blue eyes, his mouth moving, sounds coming out, real sounds, real words. "I'm not deaf," he said. I never was. I couldn't process it. Couldn't make the words make sense. My deaf husband was speaking. My deaf husband had just told me he wasn't deaf. "I can hear you perfectly," he continued. His voice was deep, smooth, educated, a voice that had been there all along, hidden. I've been able to hear everything this whole time. My legs went weak. I grabbed the counter for support. The baby kicked hard, as if reacting to my sudden spike in heart rate. "What?" I whispered, or thought I whispered. I wasn't sure any sound came out. Let me explain. "What?" Louder now. Definitely louder. "What did you just say?" Daniel held up his hands, palms out. A gesture that suddenly seemed threatening instead of gentle. "Please, let me explain. There's a reason you're not deaf." It wasn't a question. I was stating a fact, trying to make it real in my mind. "You were never deaf?" "No, I wasn't." He swallowed. "The skiing accident never happened." Well, I did have a skiing accident when I was 20, but I was fine. Just a sprained wrist. Nothing serious. I felt like I was watching this conversation from outside my own body. This couldn't be real. This couldn't be happening. "You've been lying to me," I said slowly, "for almost 2 years." It wasn't lying exactly. It was more like a test, a test. The word hung in the air between us like poison gas. "A test," I repeated. My voice sounded strange, distant. "My mother's idea, actually." Daniel began speaking faster, the words tumbling out like he'd been storing them up for months, which I realized with growing horror he had. After Samantha left me, my ex-girlfriend, I was devastated. I thought we were going to get married, and then she just left. Said I was too focused on work, not romantic enough, not exciting enough. He took a shaky breath. My mother said I needed to find someone who would love me for who I really was, not for my money or my status. Someone patient, someone kind, someone who would stick around even when things were difficult. He met my eyes. So we came up with this plan. I pretend to be deaf. Any woman who couldn't handle that, who couldn't learn sign language, who got frustrated with the communication barrier she wasn't right for. Me, but someone who stuck around, who learned my language, who was patient and understanding. That was someone special. And you found her, I said numbly. You found your special someone. How wonderful for you, Daniel. My voice cracked. Does your mother know you're not actually deaf? He hesitated, just for a moment, but it was enough. Oh, my God. I backed away from him, my hands instinctively going to my belly. Your mother knows. She's known this whole time. The tears at dinner, the gratitude that I'd accepted him despite his disability. That was all part of it. She was trying to help me find the right person by lying. I was shouting now. I don't think I'd ever shouted like that in my life. By tricking some desperate woman into marriage. By making me learn an entire language, quit my job, give up my whole life for a lie. You didn't give up your life. You chose to learn sign language. You chose to quit your job because I thought my husband was DEAF. The words ripped out of my throat. I thought you needed me to do those things. I thought I was being supportive. I thought I was being a good wife to a man with a disability. But you don't have a disability. You have a manipulative mother and apparently no moral compass of your own. Daniel's face went pale. That's not fair. You want to talk about fair? I was trembling now. I learned an entire language. For you. I quit my career for you. I'm carrying your child. My voice broke. I'm 6 months pregnant with your baby, and you've been lying to my face for 2 years. I wasn't lying to your face. You couldn't see my face when we were signing. Get out. Eleanor, please, get out of my house. It's our house. I don't care. Get out. Go stay with your mother, since you two are apparently best friends and partners in fraud. He left, actually left, grabbed his keys and walked out the door, leaving me alone in the kitchen with the salmon burning on the stove and my entire world in ruins. I don't remember much of that night. I know I called my sister Rachel, sobbing so hard she couldn't understand me at first. She drove over immediately, found me sitting on the kitchen floor surrounded by all the sign language books I'd been studying, tearing out pages one by one. He's not deaf, I kept saying. He was never deaf. It was all fake, all of it. Rachel held me while I cried, her hand rubbing my back the way our mother used to when we were children, which reminded me I have to call Mom. Maybe wait until tomorrow, but I was already dialing. My mother answered on the third ring, her voice cheerful. Eleanor, I wasn't expecting to hear from you tonight. How's my son-in-law? Did you know? Silence. Mom, did you know? Know what? Dear, that Daniel isn't deaf. That he's been pretending this whole time. That he and Constance cooked up this entire scheme to test whether I was worthy of their precious son. More silence. Then Constance mentioned they wanted to make sure any woman Daniel married would be committed. For the right reasons. I hung up on her, on my own mother, hung up and threw the phone across the room, where it shattered against the wall. She knew, I told Rachel, my voice was hollow. My own mother knew I was being manipulated, and she went along with it. Probably. Thought she was helping getting her spinster daughter married off at last. Oh, Ellie. Rachel's eyes were full of tears. That's what she called me when we were kids. Ellie. No one else called me that. Not Daniel, who'd only ever signed my full name. Not his mother, not my mother, just Rachel. What am I going to do? I whispered. I'm 6 months pregnant. I quit my job. All my savings went into this house. I can't, but I couldn't finish the sentence because I didn't know what I couldn't do. Leave? Stay? Start over? I was 34 years old, 6 months pregnant, unemployed, and I just discovered my entire marriage was built on a lie, Rachel stayed with me that night, and for several nights after Daniel called repeatedly. I didn't answer. He showed up at the house. I locked the door and told him through the wood that if he didn't leave, I'd call the police. He left letters long, handwritten letters explaining his reasoning, apologizing, begging me to understand. I burned them in the fireplace without reading them. Constance came by. I didn't let her in either. Let her please be reasonable. She called through the door. You're carrying my grandchild. We need to discuss this like adults. You lied to me for almost 2 years, I called back. You watched me struggle to learn sign language. You watched me quit my career. You cried at our wedding like you were so grateful someone would accept your damaged son, all while knowing it was fake. All while knowing you were both testing me like I was a lab rat. We were trying to protect Daniel. You were trying to control him, control who he married. Make sure she was submissive enough, patient enough, grateful enough to put up with whatever you two decided to dish out. She left, but she kept calling. So did Daniel. So did my mother, though I'd stopped answering her calls too. Was alone with my growing belly and my rage and my grief, because it was grief. The man I'd married didn't exist. The relationship I'd built was with a fiction. Every sign language conversation, every written note, every moment of silent understanding, all of it was tainted now. Had he laughed at me when I practiced my signing in front of him, messing up the hand positions? Did he find it amusing when I worked so hard to communicate with him? Did he think I was stupid for not figuring it out? And worse, much worse, did I even know him at all? What else had he lied about? What other parts of Daniel Morrison were fictional? Rachel was worried about me. You're not eating enough. You're not sleeping. This stress isn't good for the baby. None of this is good for the baby. You need to talk to him, work something out. You're married. You're having his child. I don't even know if I want to be married to him anymore. The words hung in the air. Rachel looked stricken. Ellie, you don't mean that. But I did. Or I thought I did. I didn't know what I meant anymore. Dr. Laura Bennett was the therapist Rachel found for me. A calm woman in her 50s who specialized in complex relationship issues. I liked that. She didn't call it marriage counseling because I wasn't sure I wanted to counsel this marriage so much as bury it. Tell me what happened, Dr. Bennett said in our first session. I told her everything. The whole story poured out my loneliness before meeting Daniel, the pressure from my mother, relief of finding someone who seemed to see past my age, and unmarried status, learning sign language, quitting my job, the pregnancy, the reveal. Dr. Bennett listened without interrupting, her face neutral. When I finished, she said, "That's quite a betrayal." I started crying again. I'd been crying for 2 weeks straight, it seemed. He says it was a test. To find someone who would love him for himself. And how do you feel about that? I feel like I was a contestant on some sick game show where I didn't know I was competing. Dr. Bennett nodded. That's valid. Your consent was violated. You entered into a relationship under false pretenses. Finally, someone who understood. But I need to ask you something, Eleanor. She leaned forward slightly. And I want you to really think about the answer. She paused. In those 9 months, before you married, during the time you were dating Daniel, did you love him? Of course I did. That's why I married him. Why did you love him? Because he was kind and thoughtful and patient. And I stopped because he was deaf? No. Of course not. Are you sure? Dr. Bennett's voice was gentle but probing. Because from what you've described, the deaf man Daniel was pretending to be had very specific qualities. He was quiet. He communicated deliberately. He couldn't interrupt you or talk over you. He had to really listen or appear to listen to everything you wrote or signed. He seemed patient because he had no choice but to be patient. He seemed thoughtful because every communication required thought. I'm not saying you're a bad person, Eleanor. I'm saying that the reasons we're attracted to people are complicated. And sometimes the very things we think we love about someone are actually the things we've projected onto them. I sat with that for a long moment. Was she right? Had I fallen in love with Daniel's silence, with the fact that he couldn't judge? Me out loud, couldn't criticize, couldn't voice the disappointment I'd seen on every other man's face when they realized I was 33 and single and maybe a little too independent. He still lied, I said finally. Yes, he did. And that's not okay. But the question isn't whether what he did was wrong. It clearly was. The question is, what do you want to do now? What did I want to do? I was 7 months pregnant by that point. My belly was huge, my ankles were swollen, and I was living off Rachel's charity and my dwindling savings. Daniel had offered to keep paying all the bills, but I'd refused. Taking his money felt like accepting the lie. I don't know if I can ever trust him again, I said. That's fair. Trust, once broken, is very difficult to rebuild. But it's not impossible and this is a big if both people are willing to do the work. What work? Brutal honesty. Complete transparency, accountability, and time. She paused. A lot of time. I thought about that as I drove back to Rachel's house, which was home now. Could I do that work? Did I want to? The baby kicked hard and I put my hand on my belly. What do you think? I asked quietly, should we give your father a chance? Another kick. I took it as a yes. Or maybe just gas. It was hard to tell. Daniel came to therapy with me the following week. It was the first time I'd seen him in a month. And he looked terrible. Thinner. Gray shadows under his eyes. His usually immaculate shirt was wrinkled. He started to sign. Something automatically then caught himself. Sorry. Habit. Don't, I said sharply. Don't you dare use sign language with me again. His hands dropped. Okay, Dr. Bennett gave us ground rules. I could ask any question, and Daniel had to answer honestly, no matter what. He couldn't leave until the session was over. And we both had to commit to coming back. Why? I asked first. Not the line about finding true love, the real reason. Why did you do this to me? Daniel looked at his hands, then at Dr. Bennett, then finally at me. Because I'm a coward. I hadn't expected that. Samantha didn't leave me because I wasn't romantic. Enough. She left me because I'm boring, Eleanor. I'm good with computers and numbers, but I'm terrible with people. Small talk makes me anxious. Social situations exhaust me. I'm awkward and stiff, and I never know what to say. So you decided to say nothing at all? Yes. He met my eyes. Being deaf gave me an excuse. I didn't have to make conversation at parties. I didn't have to be charming. I could just ... exist. And people would think I was strong and brave instead of weird and antisocial. And I was what? Your perfect disabled husband accessory? Someone to take care of you and make you look good? No, his voice cracked. You were amazing, Eleanor. Smart and talented and beautiful. Way out of my league. But as a deaf man, I had a chance. You saw me as someone who needed you, someone you could help. And I took advantage of that because I'm selfish and scared, and I didn't think about how it would affect you. I wanted to hit him or scream at him. Or both. You're right, I said instead. You are a coward. And selfish. And you stole almost 2 years of my life. I know. You watched me give up my career. I know. And that was wrong. He leaned forward. If you want to go back to architecture, I'll support that. Financially, logistically, whatever you need. I'm about to have a baby, Daniel. I can't exactly start a new job right now. Then after, whenever you're ready, I'll hire a nanny. I'll take parental leave, Whatever it takes. Dr. Bennett intervened. Daniel, what Eleanor is saying is that the consequences of your deception are real and lasting. You can't just fix them with money or promises. I know. He looked at me again. I know I can't fix this, but I want to try. If you'll let me. I didn't answer. Couldn't answer. We went to therapy every week. Sometimes twice a week. Daniel answered every question I asked, no matter how painful. Did he laugh at me? Sometimes yes, when I messed up signs badly. Did he read my private journals? No, never. And he seemed genuinely hurt that I'd think he... Did he love me? Yes. He said yes with tears in his eyes. And I wanted to believe him, but I didn't know how. 8 months pregnant, I moved back home. Not home to Rachel's. Home to the house in Seattle, Daniel's house, our house, whatever. But I had conditions. He slept in the guest room. We weren't together. We were two people cohabitating until I figured out what I wanted to do. That's fine, Daniel said. Whatever you need. The baby came 3 weeks later, a girl. 10 fingers, 10 toes, a healthy set of lungs that she demonstrated. Immediately, they placed her on my chest, this tiny, perfect thing, and I looked up to find Daniel crying in the corner of the delivery room. Do you want to hold her? I asked. He nodded, unable to speak. Actually unable to speak this time, choked up with emotion. I handed our daughter to him and watched his face transform into something I'd never seen before. Wonder. Pure, unfiltered. Wonder. She's perfect, he whispered. She's ours, I said. We named her Sophie. Sophie Eleanor Morrison, and she changed everything. Not immediately. I was still angry, still hurt, still wasn't sure if I could forgive him, but Sophie needed both of us. And in those early, exhausted weeks of midnight feedings and diaper changes and endless crying hers and mine, Daniel was there. He was there in ways I hadn't expected. Patient with Sophie's screaming, calm when I was falling apart, competent. With bottles and burp cloths and everything, I was terrified I'd mess up. You're good at this, I said one night. 3 weeks after bringing Sophie home. It was 2 a.m. Sophie had finally fallen asleep after an hour of crying, and Daniel and I were sitting in the nursery, too tired to move. I had to be, he said quietly. I knew I'd already messed up with you. I couldn't mess up with her too. We kept going to Dr. Bennett sometimes with Sophie in a baby carrier, sleeping through our sessions. And slowly, painfully, we started to build something new, not the relationship we'd had before. That was gone, dead, built on lies, but something else. Something honest. I'm still angry, I told him. 6 months after Sophie was born, I know. I don't know if that will ever go away completely. I know. I need you to understand that you don't get to control this, the timeline, the forgiveness, any of it. You did enough controlling already. I understand. And he did somehow. He gave me space when I needed it. He was there when I needed that instead. He went to therapy himself, working through whatever childhood trauma made him think lying was an acceptable relationship strategy. His mother was a different story. I didn't speak to Constance for a year. She'd call, leave messages, send cards. I ignored all of it. Finally, when Sophie was 14 months old, I agreed to meet her for coffee. She looked older, more fragile, but her voice was strong when she said, I owe you an apology. Yes, you do. I thought I was helping Daniel, protecting him. But I was really just trying to control his life, like I couldn't control my own marriage. And I hurt you terribly in the process. I'm sorry, Eleanor. It wasn't enough. Could never be enough. But it was something. If you want to have a relationship with your granddaughter, I said carefully, you need to understand that I'm not the submissive, grateful daughter-in-law you thought you were getting. I have opinions. I have boundaries. and I will not tolerate any more manipulation. I understand. And you need to get therapy, real therapy, because whatever made you think that test was okay, is not something I want around my daughter. Constance looked like I'd slapped her, but she nodded. I'll find someone. She did, actually. Found a therapist and started working through her control issues. It didn't fix everything. Constance and I would never be close, but it made family gatherings bearable. My mother was harder. She still insisted she was just trying to help. That she didn't really know the extent of Daniel's deception, or cordial now. But something broke between us that never fully healed. Daniel and I had another baby 3 years after Sophie, a boy we named Oliver. And somehow, in the chaos of 2 kids and sleepless nights and endless laundry, we found our way to something that looked like love, real love, not the fairy tale I'd imagined when I was 33 and lonely, but something messier, harder, more honest. We renewed our vows on our 10th anniversary, a small ceremony, just us and the kids and a few close friends. No sign language interpreter this time, just words, real spoken words. I promise to never lie to you again, Daniel said. Even when the truth is uncomfortable, even when it makes me look bad, even when I'm scared, I promise to keep choosing you, I said. Even when I'm angry, even when I remember, even when it would be easier to leave. That was 29 years ago. We're 69 and 66 now. Sophie is married with 2 kids of her own. Oliver just got engaged, and Daniel and I are still here, still working on it, still choosing each other. It hasn't been easy. Some days I still feel the ghost of that betrayal. Some days I look at him across the breakfast table and remember the moment in the kitchen when my world fell apart. Some days I wonder what my life would have been like if I'd left, if I'd started over, if I'd never forgiven him. But then I think about Sophie's wedding last year, watching Daniel walk our daughter down the aisle with tears streaming down his face. I think about Oliver calling to ask his dad's advice on engagement rings. I think about the quiet evenings on our back porch, Daniel's hand in mine, talking about nothing and everything. We talk now, really talk. About feelings and fears and mistakes. About the past and the future and the messy present. We talk in a way I never did with the silent man I thought I married, and I realized that maybe Dr. Bennett was right. Maybe I fell in love with the idea of Daniel, not the real person. And maybe he fell in love with the idea of me too. The patient, understanding woman who would accept him as he pretended to be. But we stayed long enough to meet each other for real. And we chose to love those people instead. The real, flawed, complicated people we actually are. Was it worth it? I don't know. Some days yes, some days no, but it's my life. The one I chose, the one I keep choosing.